Welcome back. Welcome in. It's Country Roads Confidential at earsports.com. This is a Paramount podcast. I am Mike Casazza, joined by Chris Anderson. We're going to talk some baseball today. West Virginia going to Baton Rouge for a super regional against Louisiana State University. But first, action in Morgantown. So close to a super regional, Chris. Instead, you have to settle for a camp, which isn't bad news because I think, I don't know, just you and I talking on the side. The first one, let's say no expectations, not low, not high, but blank slate, very much so. How does a new head coach, how does a new staff organize and operate a camp? And you were you were almost glowing in the reviews, not because of the scorching sun giving you a sunburn, which is probably not a threat this weekend either, I guess. But it seemed like a good time with Sad Boy All here last Sunday, of
Yeah,
course.
it was pretty good first camp. I think when you and I previewed it and we talked about it, and I was like, I got questions about a few things, like what I want to see, what it's going to be like, and one of them was I gave that Bruce Banner Hulk, analogy of like how coaches treat players when they are recruits, and then turn into a completely different person when they become part of the team, like a little harder on them. A lot of talk about from Rich Rodriguez about how they're not going to take it easy on guys and all this and that and everything else. Would they do that for high school kids? Yeah, sure enough, they did. During the intro, Rich Rodriguez just hops right in. It's like, hey, we're going to coach you hard, period. You may not enjoy it, but if you don't like that, we don't want you here anyway. And I was like, wow, like, because again, this is an open camp. They invite high level prospects, they invite guys that they have offered or want to offer, but it's for everyone. Like any Joe Schmo JV backup, 110-pound offensive lineman could like show up. And he's just like, hey, I don't care who you are. I don't care if this is your first time playing football. You're going to get coached like you're a college athlete. And I said, again, I was like, okay, impressed, but maybe that's just talk. And I laid out the story in one of the articles wrote right afterwards. They got into the passing on air drills, and he stopped it about six times, just yelling at wide receivers because they weren't running routes correctly, because they were lazy with their arms. They weren't, beating the drum, as they say, when you're stopping and going into your hitch. You're supposed to be moving your arms, because if you dead arm, if you keep your arm still, it's an indicator to the defensive back that you are about to make a cut, that you are about to do a hitch or whatever it is, get ready to catch. So you got to keep your arms moving. And he was having none of it. If your arms even slowed down, if you went 10 yards instead of 12, if you went 11 yards instead of 12, again, there was one point where he was like, you went 11, you went 11, you went 10, you went 11, I want 12. Stopped it six or seven times. It was like, holy cow, he's really serious about this.
Can I be honest with you about something here?
Yeah,
I uh I do not want to make this Rich Rodriguez versus Neil Brown.
right.
Don't. Um, However, I do not remember Brown rolling up his sleeves and getting into the mixing camps. By and large, in and out, moving around from the practice fields to the main field, in the golf cart, doing the handshakes. We always kept an eye on which players were shuttled over to him to make a introduction, and that obviously meant that that person was important. Perhaps he would be behind the scenes later on. You always want to follow up with that person for an offer. I don't remember him apart from doing his introduction after they play the highlight video. He gets introduced, he comes in, he talks, and then he's sort of like Geppetto the rest of the time. He's over top everything and he's pulling a lot of strings and doing administrative CEO stuff. I do not recall him getting in there, working in drills, showing a quarterback how to release, showing a receiver how to release, backpedaling with a corner, pad level offensive lineman, defensive lineman. Rich didn't do all that. My point is that, like, in my experiences there, minimal as they were, that said, you could put them together and there's hours and hours of watching them at these camps and talking to them a bunch too. So I was around them and I was following and watching them, and I do not remember that. Am I mistaken there? Not saying it was a net zero and he didn't ever do that stuff, but the impression I get from what you said right there was that. Like that was Rich day one. That's probably going to be him on the last day of camp too. Maybe he's a little bit like less engaged, a little bit more tired, but I just don't remember Neil being involved like that. And again, this is not a that's why he's gone and that's why he's here. I think there is a contrast there if I'm onto something though.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you are, and it's a give and take because you brought up both parts of it here. First off was the coaching part of it. Like Neil Brown, definitely not into it with a, say, large group. You would certainly see him pull aside a kid or two, be like, "Hey, do it like this." I think there's even a photo I took of him showing a receiver of, proper technique as the ball's arriving, doing different things, keeping your hands down into the last minute, stuff like that. But he kind of saved that for the kids that were being actively recruited, the guys that were getting offers, the guys that you referenced were pulled aside and brought over to speak with Neil Brown in a recruiting capacity. And guess what? I didn't see any of that on Monday for the
Mhm.
first Rich Rodriguez camp. Like, Rich was right in the middle of it, coaching him around. There were other times where he's, like, hanging out during the 7-on-7 drills and the one-on-one drills. He's hanging in the end zone with some of the other coaches, watching and evaluating, looking at, his list of players and writing things down, marking guys, talking to guys about people. But you didn't see what you just referenced. You didn't see, hey, that star wide receiver just got pulled out of line by, a recruiting assistant, recruiting coach, and brought over to be introduced to Rich Rodriguez. There's so many photos that we have over the last few years, and during the Dana years too. This was a staple of his. It was him being on the cart and guys being brought over to talk to him. Of you know head coach, either Brown or Holgerson, sitting in the cart with an assistant coach, with a recruit that comes over, takes the assistant coach's spot in the cart, and then they're sitting or standing next to the cart and they're chit chatting with the recruiting coach, the assistant coach, the position coach, all standing there talking to the head coach. I didn't see any of that on Monday. Now, again, it's just different. There's different ways to skin a cat. I said, I don't know how different camp's going to be because once you get efficient, it's efficient. Well, it got a lot more efficient when with the way Rich Rodriguez did it. He did it differently. But
Mhm.
the recruiting part, maybe most of his conversations were before or after places when we're not seeing it, when it's not out in public in front of everybody. I don't know. Now, assistant coaches, position coaches, coordinators, they got in there, got to talk to players. You got to see them talk on the side, but you didn't quite see the one-on-one with the head coach getting pulled over for, the red carpet treatment like they did with Brown and Holgerson.
I do remember one of the receivers that Brown did have the football skill one-on-one with, and that was the kid from Ironton, Sean Terry, right?
Yep, that was the one.
I actually remember that. Hey, hey, 4-star, catch it like this. He went to Purdue, I believe, too, right?
Yes, he did.
Did not come to West Virginia. What the crop of talent here? This was something else that the expectations we were open-minded about here. Because again, what are we doing? Are we getting guys that may be here when they sign, but may leave, and maybe they're come around in the transfer portal 2 years. Maybe it's too early. Maybe they're not ready for. Maybe they're not aware of what a WVU camp is like. Yeah, maybe, and maybe it's just not a good field. It did seem like they actually had some promising players. It wasn't a waste of anybody's time.
Yeah, I think, beforehand, it was like, hey, is it going to be all freshmen and sophomores, or going to be sophomores kind of thing, like, 2028 and 2029 kids? I'm like, man, is that really what we want to cover? 2028, 2029 kids and projecting out 3, 4 years? Not really. Hopefully it's not that, but it seemed to be trending that direction because rising seniors, which would be 2026, are going to be on official visits. And then rising juniors, 2027, a lot of those guys are like, I should already have an offer from the eval period. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of 2027 kids. I mean, that was where the main focus was. There were a couple 2026 kids to know. Tight end Marcus Monroe was one of them. He was a standout. He's awaiting word on whether or not he's going to get an offer to potentially be the second tight end commitment in his class. That's an example of 2026. But the vast majority of these kids were 2027. And I was impressed. Again, I I think I said that tight end, or I know I said tight end was the best group out of it. And I've seen the tight end group sometimes at these camps. I know the tight end army's ready to roll on there, but there were just a handful of kids that were really, really talented in that room. Um, and I mean, I still remember there was a camp and God what was, oh, Dan Gerberry, if you remember him, was tight ends coach several years ago. And, there's different candidates, especially with a position like that. There's some camps that I saw him have several Division I prospects. There was one camp in particular where it was just him and a kid that's probably going to max out at junior varsity in high school, and that was it. And it was the only tight end that was in the entire camp. And so, tight end, you don't really know what to expect. And he had a bunch of dudes there. I mean, he had a kid there, Jude Cascone, Cascone. I'm got sure if I got that pronunciation correct, but he's another 2026 tight end was there. He was the guy that I saw and took a picture of before camp even started. He and his parents walking around with Nicewander, and he's got an Alabama offer. Like he's got offers from all over the place. So there was some legit talent in that tight end room in 2026, 2027. Um, Kind of a fan of the, offensive line, solid group there. A lot of guys they were looking at. There's a kid from Pittsburgh Central Catholic they really liked.
Mhm.
Running back, there was a kid from Raleigh that they really liked and might be offering here soon. Wide receiver had a couple guys. One got a new offer, Trey Haddad from over in Cleveland.
Yeah.
And up and down the room, it seemed like every room had at least one or two guys that were at least worth looking at.
Haddad looked like a real athlete too, just jumping up and over people making plays too.
Yeah, that was the play of the day.
That's right, yeah. We talked about which assistant coaches you wanted to keep an eye on. Are they going to be recruiters? Are they going to be really active around the camp? Who's going to be someone to watch? And the one piece of feedback I got from that was like, do not sleep on Michael Nicewander.
He,
I was
he
like,
was
really?
involved in everything. Yeah.
I think that the idea is that he's going to be a plus recruiter, and if you're talking about tight ends, that's fine. But when he gets to spread his wings a little bit and he goes to his regions he's familiar with, or he can tap some people on the shoulder that he got to know at Alabama, for example, onward and upward with him, that might be it. Hey, do you think? I was thinking about this. The first 10th assistant coach at West Virginia was Dan Gerberry.
Yep.
Now we have unlimited assistant coaching staffs. How much of that decision do you think was so you could have a tug of war?
Yeah. Speaking of nice wander, like they wouldn't start. It was offense and versus defense. You got to pick five coaches on each side, and offense would not start until they found Nice Wander. And then they had somebody get on the mic to call over to bring him over there because I think he was off talking to a recruit on the side. And they were like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, no, no. We need you here. Need you over here in the tug of war so that the offense could win. So they took that pretty seriously. I'm wondering if they're going to do that after every camp and we're going to keep like a series record here of offense versus defense for the entire summer. Have to keep tabs on that. But speaking of those, hey, the extra assistant coaches, hey, you know what scenario that really works out well in? These camp situations.
Yeah.
And I'm really interested to see how, I mean, because they were just very efficient, everything. Like, again, I talked about that 7-on-7. They were like, yeah, we're going to do 7-on-7 routes against there. And I was like, there is no chance this is going to work. None. Because I mean, you see it get bogged down with one-on-ones in the past, but now that it's 7-on-7s, you got all these coaches that yeah, the example. They got guys in groups with a quarterback, tight end, running back, a couple receivers, and while one is up, another is with Nice Wander with a binder that has like 10 plays in it, 10 route sheets in it, so that it's just like you hold it open and it's got like 4 or 5 routes, and that's what they do, and that's it. And then I think it was Logan Bradley over at another spot and another group's with him. And so then as soon as that first route tree is done, Nice Wander's groups goes up, and then another group runs up to Nice Wander, and then that group gets finished, and Bradley's team goes up there, and then they go. And it was just really efficient just because they had so many coaches everywhere I had a million things went through my mind at this, especially like when I was watching offensive line, where it was Jack Bignell working almost exclusively with tackles, and then Derek Tressler working almost exclusively with interior offensive linemen. Is that how they're splitting it up once we get to like actually coaching the current players, or was that just a camp thing? Will I show up on Friday for the next camp and they flip flop? I don't know. It's just things I'm kind of tucking away in the back of my mind with some of this stuff because yeah, there's a ton of coaches out there and there's a lot to try to digest and figure out.
And that for sure. Good point. Let's wrap up football here. One more question. I want you to lead off with one thing and wrap up with another here because you mentioned the timing of this and how people take the one visit and they commit. And there's always like a fear, like we got to get him here early. Do we want to get him after that first visit? Is it to be the first impression or the last impression? That's common stuff. So we had the first weekend here. What impact did that have on West Virginia's targets? They haven't had anybody commit. They did have offers though. That's fine. It's probably too soon for a lot of these players to commit. I get that. And then what's on tap this weekend? Because again, now you're looking at the second weekend. You could be the second impression or the last impression, and it may be the first visit for some of these people too. I get that, but just kind of like bookend those if you don't mind.
So they didn't have a first official visits the first weekend.
Mhm.
They were, and I double checked that with capital P people. Like, hey, did anybody sneak in? this weekend? Did you guys only have one or two? And it was, hey, no. Saturday was alumni picnic where all the former players were invited up, and they took that very seriously. Like that was not a, hey, we just want to throw something together. They took that very seriously, and they wanted to focus on that, and they wanted to focus on the first camp. So that was Saturday, that was Sunday. So no real plan to have official visits this past weekend. It might have backfired with a couple kids. You saw a couple offensive linemen go off the board. Camden Goforth to Coastal Carolina, which is a guy that I think West Virginia could have snagged if maybe he was visiting there first. But he had already planned that Coastal Carolina visit, so I don't know if it would have mattered if West Virginia would have said, "Hey, we'd rather have you here May 31st." I don't think that's a thing. I don't know if it's going to happen, but think they missed out on a couple guys. Maybe you can still convince them to come in. Getting in first can be important. That's a reason why under previous coaching staffs, under Neil Brown, under Dana, like it was, and now I know, during Dana's time, they didn't have the summer official visits, at least for most of it, but it was get them in on that first weekend and just hope you can get them. And, because that first weekend, you can probably get some of those kids to just commit and cancel all visits. Other guys you can get to commit, and they're still going to take visits, but you still have a 50-50 shot of them staying committed to you. So early, I think, in my opinion, is better. You really have to get a read on the kid. Do they truly mean it when they say they're going to wait to announce until July, August? If they really mean that, if you know this kid well enough that you can trust that, sure, you can wait a little bit.
Mhm.
These are 17-year-old kids, man. They are dumb and jump on things quickly, like rash decisions. So yeah, they're going to go to a school and a school's going to say, "Hey, we're going to pay you 250 grand and you can start here one day and here you go. Love it. Here's a jersey." And they're going to commit. Like it's just going to, well, they can't help themselves. So I do think earlier is better, but honestly, like I I think they can still probably convince a couple of those guys that may have committed elsewhere to still come up and visit later if they really push hard enough.
All right, good stuff here. Let's do a service to the audience here. We're gonna take a break, so you can't skip forward. A little known fact: if you skip forward in the commercials, you get a virus in your laptop and your cell phone. I had no idea, but that's what they told me in the email. So I just want to pass it along to everybody. Do not skip the commercials, but adjust your speakers. The volume might be high. We're gonna take a break for commercials. We'll be back right after this. We are back Country Roads Confidential here at earsports.com. I'm Mike Casazza. That's Chris Anderson. We are talking now West Virginia baseball, Mountaineers' second ever second super regional in as many years. Boy, if you thought that going to UNC in the Chapel Hill regional was tough last year, Chris, that was a really good team. I think a lot of people thought that could be, well, certainly a College World Series team, maybe in the final series. Might be a taller task this time here because this LSU team has a lot of the tools and weapons to be a national champion at the end in West Virginia there. 2 o'clock on Saturday on ESPN, 6 p.m. on Saturday, game three, if necessary, on Sunday. I just want to point this out too. Steve Saban's interview, and I hate putting words in his mouth. I hate because so many words come out of his mouth. He answers questions in detail, in length. He said something really interesting when he was talking about the LSU series, going on about the season, the tournament, what they went through at the Clemson Regional, and hey, let's take a break, let's gather, let's reflect on what we did, and then we'll reset. And we'll figure out how to beat LSU in a 3 game series, hopefully a 2 game series. And I don't know if he meant like, oh, geez, game three against these guys is going to be rough, or if he was like, we're good enough to win with Sonis and Kern. Let's not think about game three. But that just kind of struck me as that's the challenge here because the depth of pitching for LSU is just excellent. In addition to their talent on offense, they just have the best of a lot of stuff, the best resources, the best stadium, the best budget, the best NIL, this and that, and the other thing. And by the way, some of the best players that recruiting or transferring can buy. And West Virginia just belongs in this company right now. They've earned the way there in back-to-back years. I think they were one of the few teams that swept through the regional, but they had the hardest sweep in a regional too. If you look at some of the rankings out there too, so they did it the easy way, hard way. They had the hardest field, but they went 3-0. And it almost doesn't matter right now because you start off and now it's instead of this tricky 5 game series perhaps that you have to manage, it's just air quotes 3 games against just a juggernaut in the sport.
Yeah, I mean, you look at what they did, especially in those first couple games where they could just go to Eggenson and Anderson
Mhm.
and just cruise. It was back-to-back shutouts. I think we talked about that as we were wrapping up the West Virginia regional. I was like, man, if LSU gets there, those first two pitchers are tough. I now again, you could say that a little bit about West Virginia's guys, because West Virginia, tough, Kern, that's honest. That's a good one too as well, but it's going to be hard to top LSU's one too. Um, like everyone else, you know, it gets a little rough after that. Like,
Yeah,
not, I mean, it's that they're in a better situation certainly than West Virginia after those top two, and better situation than most schools. And this is something we've talked about on our message board with our fans and VIP members. Is that hey, from like age 8 up until like the major leagues, everyone has one or two pitchers, and that's about it that you really truly trust. And then it kind of falls off. But LSU does have a couple guys that they can, you know, let's say really roll the dice with that might work out. I mean, Kaysen Evans that stepped in the middle of that game, the regional clinching game
yeah,
as a reliever and just went a handful of innings and 12 strikeouts. Just
yeah.
I'm just gonna stroll in and strike out 12. I don't think West Virginia has that in their bag, so that's certainly something to keep an eye on. And I kind of agree with Saban's. Like, if this goes three, West Virginia's losing. I think. Like, I mean, anything can happen once you get to the game three. I get that. Like, everything's in play. We've seen. Was it UNC where was it Clark threw 190 pitches and then was back like 36 hours later pitching? Like,
Yeah.
so eh, everything's up in the air. If you told me Kern pitched 130 and they won on Saturday and then he was back pitching middle relief for 4 innings on Monday, I'd buy it. But it's going to be a lot of pressure on West Virginia to try to take at least one, if not both of these first two. I mean, it's obviously at least one, but both of these first two games.
Yeah, so LSU, I mean, they're not immune to kryptonite too. They run their top two starters out there, Anderson and Ayenson, the first two games. The third game, what do you do now? Okay, they lose. Now they got to go back again. They got to find out what to do, and they bring in. I don't know if they knew what they were going to do in the third game, and they went with a starter who I think had 5 or 6 starts, and he just didn't have it. And they just kind of went bullpen game. The second game, they thought, I'm sorry, the fifth game, but the second game against ALR, what can they do? And their first guy is I think he was an all conference player. I'm trying to remember, but he ended up just getting beat around by a hot team. And you're right, Evans comes in. He struck out 12 in 6 innings, and like got out of some clutch situations. And Chris, he's a freshman, and not only like that's something that's really impressive too. And he might be your game three starter unless you can get to the bullpen in the first two games. That takes him away, and then things get a little messy. But like the thing about that kid is like he was obviously one of the top pitching prospects out there, also one of the top shortstop prospects out there. And he has taken zero at bats this year. Not because like LSU's loaded. I mean, they are obviously, but like he's that good and he's just focused on pitching because like they really do have one of the best like assistant coaches in the country. Their pitching coach, trying to think of his name right now, but he was with Jay Johnson in Arizona. He was at Texas A&M. Uh, they 2022, Jay Johnson moves to LSU. Doesn't have this whole staff that's the same as Arizona, and they're okay. They lose in a regional Southern Miss in the fifth game. They go out and they hire the pitching coach. They win the national championship in 23, and then they've just had really good pitching ever since then too. Just I mean, they're really good. I don't want to like gush about them. I think a lot of people know it. If you look at any of the previews and any of the videos and read any of the stories, pretty much everybody here expects from bookmakers to writers on down that LSU is going to go through this. But boy, those that first game in particular is really important for West Virginia just because man, tough environment, a team that seems like it has the swagger back. Like to win an elimination game and to win it the way they did coming back, that's really powerful, I think.
Um, Biggest underdog out of all of the super regional matchups. Strong? Like, is that insulting or fair?
Well, I mean, someone's gonna be the top seed left, and someone's gonna have to face them. I'm not saying that LSU's the top seed left, but like, Vanderbilt's gone. I think Tennessee's obviously really good, but Tennessee's got a tough matchup, right? They drew Arkansas, right? That's difficult. So like West Virginia is this team that was what 3-8 at the end of the regular season, and I'm not sure that they probably get enough respect for doing what they did, but You're going into LSU, and like that ballpark, that crowd is just different here. And again, in a 3 game series, you're looking at two major league draft picks in the first game and the second game. That's just hard. Like that's a there's a respect factor in that, and that I think comes into account. And I'm not surprised by that. I think that's probably about right too. By the way, the pitching coach's name is Nate Yeski. If you're looking him up, like he's just got like a golden touch, and he's done it this year for sure, from starters to relievers on down.
And just for the record, for everybody listening, the teams that are ranked above LSU, LSU is number six, was the number six regional seed. The teams that were ranked above LSU that are still remaining, number five, North Carolina, they face off against Arizona, who has been red hot of late.
Yeah.
Um, Number four, Auburn, who faces number 13, Coastal Carolina. So top 15 matchup there. And number three, Arkansas, who you mentioned is playing number 14, Tennessee. So yeah, the teams that are ranked above LSU all have some pretty tough opponents. Am I
Yeah, I
forgetting
forgot
somebody?
Arkansas. No, I forgot Arkansas or Tennessee were flip flopped. I was just giving Tennessee the benefit of the doubt being the defending champs, but that's
Well,
the
that's
seed's
I
the
was
other
gonna
way
say
around.
that's just traditional. You would think of Tennessee that way, right?
Yeah, right.
But
Hey, here's a bit of trivia here for you. West Virginia sets a record last season for 3 game attendance at 11,200. That's great. That's a great weekend. LSU's average attendance 11,100 for 1 game. Like you thought Clemson was rough at like 90, was it 9,100, something like that, with yeah, the fans in left field, all that goofy stuff. Cool. Just different. The other Death Valley, like Clemson's Death Valley and LSU's Death Valley, different in football and different in basketball too. That said, though, fans are not jerks down there. I've been to LSU for basketball games and football games, and I've even been like in the stands and not covering one before too. And like smart, res I mean, everybody's got a little bit of knucklehead in 'em.
yeah.
But like what I've heard about the baseball experience on there is that it's like pretty congenial too. Yeah, they'll get after you, but like they will applaud you if you get out of a jam, and like they understand what good baseball is because they've seen just again really good college baseball for a long, long time. Multiple national championships with multiple coaches. The infrastructure is you're a 7 time national champ. So and all since 1991, there's a lot going on there on the field, but there's a whole lot that goes on off the field for support and empowering what they got going on there.
Something I wanted to ask you because you were on the a call with Saban's. Um, the lineup stuff. You and I talked about it after game three. You know, you already wrote the story about the Lumsden versus Hussey situation, how it may or may not kind of flip back depending on situations. He left open that possibility, but anything you took from that conversation with him? Because again, after the game, after the regional win, I asked you, hey, are you making a move of like Guzman up to the top of the order or anything like that? Anything you took from your conversations with Saban or that whole interview that he might be mixing things up on the lineup again?
Not yes or not no, which is not the great answer, right? But that's probably his point too. No one asked him what about lineup changes, but he did kind of say that he really liked having that 7, 8, 9 punch, and that happened to be Lumsden, Kresser, and Guzman, and that's two new bats in there. You could argue that he hid the two new bats at the bottom of the lineup. Okay, that would make sense. You don't know what you're getting out of him, and at this point, you don't know what you don't know, and you put that off for as long as you can, which is 7 and 9 in the batting order, right? Did he say, I'm going to put these two in and just juice the bottom third of my lineup? I doubt that. But that was the result. Do you mess with that? I don't know. And again, I think the one thing about having Guzman at the bottom of the lineup is that he's there. He scares you a little bit. Um, what's the difference though if he's number one? Because once you get to 7 and 8, number one is right around the corner again too. And just in college baseball and in baseball in general, like I think you want to get your best hitters as many at bats as possible, and you are taking away one, maybe two at bats when you bat a guy ninth as opposed to number one. And that's amplified, Chris, when you're facing a really good pitching staff that LSU absolutely has. And if they're going to have a lot of 1, 2, 3 innings or, one hit, one walk, not a lot of big innings, not a lot of threats, you want your big bats up as much as possible. So part of me was thinking, why mess with it if that worked? I don't think that was the plan. I don't. I just don't think he said, I got a way to fix my lineup. I'm going to stack it at the bottom. That doesn't make sense to me. Um, and if you got guys who are hot, they're going to be hot anywhere too. And I think you're more likely to see pitches sometimes at the start of a game because the guy doesn't want to get into trouble. These guys, one guy is better throwing strikes than the other, but they're both good pitchers. Anderson and Anson. We can talk about them if you want. But I would lean in now to maybe moving Guzman up, just because if you stick him at 9, sure he's lingering when you get to 6, 7, 8. He's still lingering when you get to 7, 8, 9 because he's right around the corner. He's 1 instead of 9. It's not that big of a deal. It's a bigger deal if he's waiting at number 9 to get up and he gets 1 or 2 fewer at bats than he should. So I could certainly see that happening now. The one, Chris, that I don't know about is Hussey Lumsden. Um, I think Lumsden vindicates the decision. I think if he doesn't have the game that he had, there might be a change. I don't think that you can just say, well, we got good defense and a walk and a run from Hussey. We can pencil that in too. I just think that he didn't come out and say, the guy's in a slump and I wanted to shake things up a little bit. The Guzman thing makes total sense, apart from the fact he'd never really played third base. The Hussey thing with Lumsden, it just seemed like a hunch. I don't think he wanted to say, after being vindicated by making this maneuver, I don't think he wanted to say, I was rolling the dice. I was trusting my gut. That's not as commendable or scientific as what he explained. And it's a kinder thing to Hussey, too. Like if he says this guy doesn't have it, he's 7 for 38 and he misses the ball a lot. Lumsden has had good swings and good ABs, whatever. I don't think he's going to come out and say that, but I could see that being a change as far as personnel. And I could see Guzman going up being a change in the order.
All right. Kind of want to end on this. Is there a scenario here, or is there an outcome from this weekend that hinders the progress this program has made, or is it already there no matter what happens this week? Let's say West Virginia just gets smoked Saturday, Sunday. Everything's still on the way up. Yes? Or could that kind of hinder things?
That's a great question. I feel like part of me feels like you clear a hurdle when you get to the regional, but then like you still got to keep running. There's still more hurdles in the track. Um, and like you want to finish the race. Some people do, some people don't here. One team finishes the race, 8 get to the final stage. And West Virginia's not in that group of 8 yet and got close last year. I think people forget, yeah, they got swept 2-0, but they got walked off in the first game and they had the winning run on second base in the second game. They were close both times. They maybe could have, would have, should have won the first game and had every chance in the second game. Interestingly, the last out is Lumsden with Guzman on third base in the last game last year too. Think about that. So it's cool to get here. It's cool to get here twice in a row. And I'm not saying they're behind schedule, they don't get the win, but I just think you're like, if they get blown off the field, then you're saying, all right, the 2 seed from the Clemson region gets into Baton Rouge and doesn't belong. What do they have to do? Which could be good for the program. Pain sometimes produces positive stuff. I don't think anybody wants to endure that though, too. So if you're close last year against the team that people thought was a CWS participant or contender, and then you get to the same stage this year and you're not close against, I think, a better team, whatever, that could be discouraging a little bit. And then you start to like look under the rug and be like, who's leaving? Who's getting drafted? Who's not coming back? That's some stuff that could get kind of risky here. Because they do lose a bunch just by natural progression. And this baseball has so much turnover, you're bound to lose more players too. Transfer portal is a big deal. West Virginia has players who are going to get phone calls. Absolutely. And that's West Virginia's duty now to try to keep them. That's just the way this goes now. College baseball has always been a little bit like that. Now it's on steroids at NIL. And those steroids are legal here too. So I think that it's a great conversation to have, and it's a good time to have it because that means the program is in the right direction. If you're not having this conversation, what are you doing? But the reality is, if they just clear that hurdle again and they stand there, and everybody else keeps running the race, well, they haven't really progressed. So non-competitive losses would be a real bad thing. Like if they lose 7-0 and 12-0, like LSU's first 2 opponents did in the regional, that's bad. If their bats are muted, if their bullpen falls apart, if they don't have the competitive parts that I think a lot of people suspect could be their undoing, yeah, you do not want to be predictable. And if predictable is you don't have the offense in your bullpen cost you the games, that's a negative.
Mike, so we got Saturday, 2 p.m.,
Hmm.
Sunday, 6 p.m. First game's on ESPN, second game's on ESPN2, Monday, TBD. both time and potential channel and game period. Best of three series this weekend. Some other games are going to be kicking off. Yeah, some of them are what, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. West Virginia, LSU, and a couple other series are Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So be on the lookout for that. Camp also Friday to hold you over until the regional, super regional on Saturday. And so that should take you through the next few days. And then next week, 7-on-7 on Wednesday, 7-on-7 on Friday. Official visits are happening. Players should be arriving, depending on when you're listening to this, any moment for the weekend. It'd be a big weekend for West Virginia football recruiting. A lot going on. Be sure to get your VIP for 60% off, Mike. We're
Mm.
doing it again. Pennies, 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 pennies all around. We'll put the link in the story below. We'll put the link in the YouTube video below the description. Go check it out. 60% off VIP. Get the coverage for a full year. 60% off.
One more thing on the stadium, since we opened a lot of eyes with our talk about the Clemson Stadium,
Mm-hmm.
310 down one line. It's 330 down the lines at LSU, 365 in the alleys, 405 to center, 10-foot fence. Um, Not a lot of home runs in that park for one, they're pitching, and two, because it's a bigger stadium. Like 330 is pretty significant down the line. You're looking at usually 325. That's a bigger park. Um, Shadows can play an effect too. I think at sunset time that won't be a problem. At 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock game maybe we'll see. But hey, should be a good one. We will have you covered there on the field, off the field, baseball, football, possibly the round thing that they shoot at the Coliseum. We'll see. We'll try to figure that
They're
out.
not they're not going into the season with 7 players. Are you sure?
There might be. I heard five, maybe just five. Try
Okay.
to confirm that.
That's all you
Uh,
need.
my phone works. I'm using it. It comes the other way too. We'll see if we can get some intel coming up sometime soon. Until next time, I'm Mike Casaza.
And I'm Chris Anderson.
We will talk to you then.